Biotics Research has been a leader in the nutrition industry for 50 years. Known for top quality supplements and enhanced product delivery systems, they drive advancement by focusing on research initiatives, unique product formulations, and unprecedented quality control. Family owned with a rich history, they are very proud of their valued partnerships with healthcare professionals. Welcome to Adjusted Reality, a podcast series trusted by the adjusted and brought to you by the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress, where we learn from athletes, celebrities, influencers, and healthcare professionals about how to optimize health in a fun, relatable way. Join me, Dr. Sherry McAllister, as we welcome chiropractor Dr. Heidi Haavik. Now, Dr. Haavik is a trailblazer in chiropractic science and neurophysiology. With a PhD from the University of Auckland, Dr. Haavik has spent over 18 years researching how chiropractic adjustments influence the brain and the nervous system. As Vice President of Research and the Dean of Research at the New Zealand College of Chiropractic and founder of Haavik Research, she's helping bridge the gap between clinical chiropractic practice and cutting-edge neuroscience. Now get ready for a fascinating conversation with one of the profession's most passionate and pioneering voices. She's actually back by popular demand. A beloved guest, a truly adored adjusted reality individual, she brings together our community and she returns to share more insight, inspiration, and unforgettable conversations with our fans who simply cannot get enough. Thank you so much, Dr. Haavik, for being with me again.
Thanks, Sherry. I just love chatting to you. So we
Well,
could do this all day long.
this is the only way I get to catch up with one of my best friends. So here we are. We're back
Crazy, isn't it?
to so much has happened since we've had you back
Yes.
at our last season's podcast. We have now rounded out 100 episodes, Dr. Haavik. So I'm pretty
Oh,
excited about that. But I want to start with, it's been a while, almost 6 months since we've had you, and you are working on a lot of stuff. In the big picture, I'm going to put you on the spot right now. I'm going to ask you to think about a couple of just very key words that we're going to talk about today. Key words that are going to drive this conversation because your life has seen so much intensity. What are some of those key words that we're going to talk about today?
right. So we're going to be talking about things like brain networks. We're going to be talking about things like anxiety and depression. We're going to be talking about things like cleansing the brain and fertilizing the brain. And we're going to be talking about things like how our activities that we choose to do every day can alter things like the way our genes are read and expressed in our bodies, and how this can change with things like chiropractic care, which is there's been some mind-boggling publications in the last couple of years. Well, even
There
in the last
has
couple of months.
mind-boggling, our
Yeah,
brain-boggling.
yeah, brain-boggling. I know.
I think we
No,
can come up
so
with new
very
words.
exciting topics today. Do
Yes,
you like the words?
and this could be literally known as tripnotic or fantabulous. So here we go. We're going to start
I'm
with
into that.
the opportunity for people to really understand the impact that their nervous system has had over the course of even the last, let's just say, 6 years is absolutely phenomenal. And
Yeah.
the research is coming out. We need more, clearly. But I want you to go back to a few things that really started this grounded the science for you. For those who haven't listened to the last two times Dr. Haavik is there, they're definitely worth the review because it sets you up for really understanding what today's conversation is going to be. There's groundbreaking information in science and research that supports chiropractic in the impact on the nervous system. I want you to start very basically kind of giving an overview of the last two podcasts we've been together on. Where should we catch them up so that they know the impact that the science has had? And then I want you to walk us all the way through where you are today.
So I think what's quite important is that even our understanding of how the brain works has changed quite dramatically in the last couple of decades. And one really important thing, like back in the 80s, which of course we weren't born back then, you know what I mean?
Of
But,
course.
back, no, no, no. But back in the 80s, we didn't even think that the brain changed. Like, once you had, your neurons and the brain was set. And, I remember being told, don't do boxing because it kills off nerve cells. And if they die, nothing can be done about it. But we now know with beyond a doubt that no, 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 the brain changes until the day we die. But so then it was sort of followed a period where we just thought the brain just randomly changed all the time. And what's come out in the last little while is that the brain doesn't just randomly change. It actually does an awful lot of predicting, and it creates its own story about what's happening inside it and around it. And this story, the reason it does this is that when your brain genuinely pays attention, it uses an awful lot of energy. And so you can't be wasting all your energy by genuinely paying attention unless you need to. So unless sort of something's going on that's, say, for example, going against what the brain thinks is going on, that's called an error detection. So it detects errors in what it predicts, then it will change. Or if something like a fire alarm went off, then again it will genuinely pay attention. So there's situations where the brain will update. And it's really fascinating when you start looking at, well, what when I'm saying update, this is what we call neural plasticity. So it's like this adaptability of the brain. We are capable of adapting and changing, but it doesn't just automatically happen. And there's usually like four key factors that you need for the brain to update and change. Actually needs to be paying attention or focus to whatever it is that you're wanting to learn or change. And then you need a little bit of stress, not too much or the whole system shuts down. But if you don't have enough stress, it won't even really engage the brain. And then you need to have like the real it's like you have the acetylcholine which release of the neurotransmitter. It's a bit like the spotlight that literally hones in onto what it is that you're looking at, and it needs to be meaningful to the brain or it won't bother to change. So if it's meaningful that yes, actually this would be important, I'll change this. And then you need sleep. And that's another really important factor because the brain doesn't just get cleansed, because we know that that's when the brain actually washes itself out like a brain dishwasher. But it also is where you consolidate important things that you might have learnt that day. So these sort of four factors are really fascinating to me because I think it sort of explains why the chiropractic adjustment is so absolutely profound, because you are bringing attention to, for example, now what we know about the spinal muscles. We've learned a lot over the last couple of decades too about how important these small muscles are that are closest to our spine, skull, and pelvis, the little muscles that cross individual bones. Like we know that if you injure your back then we know that these little muscles, they start to undergo these maladaptive or not very nice changes, and they kind of shrink away and atrophy, become stiff and fibrotic, and they even change their fiber type and even their ability to respond to stretch, which is what they're the muscle spindle stretch receptors within these little muscles, they even change and become more blunted. So and there's so much, Sherry, information coming out now about the importance of these little muscles. For example, there's all these studies come out very recently showing that, the degree of atrophy and fatty infiltration in these little muscles that we know happens from injuries or stress or local inflammation, it actually predicts like outcomes, like how well a person will respond to things like spinal surgery or disc hernia surgeries. And so the importance of these little muscles is becoming so well known now. And then again, go back to thinking about the adjustment, the chiropractic adjustment. We set up so nicely on a segment where we can feel this dysfunction has been there for a long time, because the joints that, where this dysfunction's happened, they can't, the brain isn't aware of what's going on because the little messages aren't going to the brain. So the brain's not controlling the movement pattern around that joint very well. So it kind of becomes a bit stiff and tight, and often you get little micro traumas because it's not being moved properly. So when you start palpating on it, or like chiropractors will do, they'll just check down the spine, you can almost feel that it's tender, and the patient will go, well, yeah, oh, that's really quite sore, like, yeah, I know, I can feel it. And then, so we're bringing attention to it. And then we do that rapid little adjustment. And that stretches those little muscles, blasts information to the brain, proprioceptive information about, from these little muscles that haven't been moving for an awfully long time. Well, depending on how long that this dysfunction's been there for them. And that's a sort of a signal. It's a biological signal that the brain goes, whoa, what's this? And we think it's so important that because it's suddenly now getting information about the core of the body. And then the brain goes, whoa, I need to reset this. And it starts to reset the programs. What's and then, of course, what's one of the most common things we hear from patients that see chiropractors after they've been adjusted, especially in the early days, is that, oh my goodness, I slept like a baby.
Yeah,
So, so
absolutely.
there's the consolidation taking place. But what's absolutely fascinating over the last 20 years is all this research that we've been doing and others showing that it's not just about the control of the spine. So this information from these little muscles around the spine affect the brain's, so many of the brain programs. And this is where I feel the latest studies, Sherry, is these network studies. So the information from the spine isn't just important for how the brain controls the movement in the spine, but it also is involved in multiple different networks. And a network is just different hubs in the brain that have the same sort of conversation. And we know that the sensory information from the body and from the world, often a lot of different information comes together in a particular network. Say, for example, we have an emotional network that is kind of always judging, how safe am I? How dangerous is this? How much do I need to worry or stress? Or, so there's the emotional network. There's networks that control the movement of the spine. There's networks that deal with auditory information and visual information. So what we see and what we hear and how we interpret things. And over the years, we've shown through experiment after experiment that we're changing so many of these different aspects. Like, for example, the way people actually interpret what they see and hear. I mean, people used to laugh at that. Well, there's no bone that squashes any nerve that goes to the eyes and ears. And like, no, 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 because that's not what we're impacting. We're not impacting the nerve that goes from the eye to the brain, or the nerves that go from the ears to the opposite primary auditory cortex. But we're changing the way the brain interprets what it means for us as a human being. And that's where the really important changes are taking place, which is why, again, I said networks at the beginning, because once we started looking at these networks, Sherry, oh my goodness me, like we're getting these dramatic changes within and between these networks that literally define who we are as a human being, how we feel about ourselves, how we interact with other human beings, how we fit into the world, and what we like tell ourselves, and literally how the brain interprets what's happening inside you. Like, so literally your reality, which is why it's so funny that, the adjusted reality, it's such a spot on title, because literally with the chiropractic adjustment, you are literally adjusting that reality that the brain is creating.
It's so
Come up.
beautiful is you like to me it's like walking into a candy shop and I talk to you and it's like all the sweetness and the goodness comes all at once. It's like I totally get you. You are so passionate and so definitely involved in how the brain is changing everything. It literally is. And you were so spot on about the fact that, many years back we said once the brain has had some type of degeneration, it doesn't come back. And we know now that's a myth that we can debunk. And we want people to really focus on this. You talked about the little teeny spinal muscles and what they do.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't have spinal stability or you don't have the muscles firing properly, the neurocontrol is going to be off. The panel that really generates how everything works is in your head, and then everything else follows. And people need to recognize that 20 years ago, we thought it was all about the spine. We thought everything was about the
Yeah.
spine. The muscle quality
Yep.
predicts, whether or not you're going to have low back pain. But that's only part of the situation. The other part
Yeah.
is, and I think people that are listening that are starting to recognize that they're aging, I know it's a terrible word to say, and that they might be getting a little more frail as they age. This is the time to reflect on what you're really doing because your muscle loss, especially around the spine, increases the biomarkers for more reduced mobility, for people to fall, to have
Yep.
functional decline. All of these pieces,
Yep.
if you're listening right now, you're aging with us. Heidi and I are
Yeah.
aging. So,
Well,
how do you want
there's
to
some
age?
exactly. There's some really interesting research on that, specifically looking at like multiple aspects of what you've just mentioned, both with the like for example, we know that as we age, we sort of we can become a bit stiffer unless we're actually really looking after ourselves and exercising and seeing a chiropractor. Because and then as you stiffen up like that, you have less and less of these proprioceptive signals that are coming from our body. So why you end up with the falls then is because you rely more and more on your vision. Yet as we age, often people have more and more visual problems as well. So it's like you've lost two, you lose, a certain percentage of both your proprioception coming from your body and your vision. All you've really got left is the vestibular system in your inner ear.
Yes.
And so people are more and more likely to have falls, but you can prevent this. Like, and most people aren't aware that, you can work on this. Not necessarily, well, yeah, I think you can actually prevent it, but because there's lots of studies again looking at like exercise programs and things like that and how that reduces your chances of falls. It's really, really very exciting research. But we've also looked at a study with chiropractic on older adults, specifically looking at these sensory motor functions that are very important for older people with falls. Like another thing that we know that as our brain ages, it becomes less and less able to integrate multiple different sensory informations at the same time. So for example, information from the eyes and the ears and the body, that's it's called multimodal integration because there's multiple modes of information that it needs to integrate. And we did this awesome randomized control trial. This was actually Kelly Holt's PhD research, which I keep coming back to for multiple reasons. But one of the cool things to me that stood out was some of the perceptual things, is what I was talking about before, that the spine impacts the brain's accurate ability to perceive what's going on. Like, for example, in the trial that we had, it was a 12-week trial with chiropractic care in people over 65 who were at risk of falls. And half got randomized into chiropractic care and half were randomized into a waitlist control. So they didn't get chiropractic care. Now, the guys that got chiropractic, their ability to sense what was going on in their ankle joint improved significantly. We only measured at the baseline and at 4 weeks of care and then at the 12 weeks at the end of the study. And by 4 weeks, their brains, the brains of the older adults that were seeing chiropractors, were more accurately aware of what was going on in the ankles. And we asked the chiropractors, did anybody touch any ankles? And they're like, no, no, no. They literally just checked and adjusted this dysfunction in the spine. So that spinal information enables the brain to more accurately perceive what's going on in the ankle. And in a way, I mean, it's like, duh. I mean, of course, because where do ankles attach to? They attach to the knee, and the knee attaches to the hip. And where does the hip attach? Into your pelvis. Your brain cannot sense what's going on in the leg or even control the movement of your leg muscles or arms for that matter that also attach to our spine, um, without knowing where the core is, where they actually attach. So if you are not aware of what's going on in the spine, you can't be aware of what's happening in the limbs. Like it actually makes an awful lot of sense. But that was just one of the measures. So then we also looked at this really exciting one, which was the sound-induced flash illusion. So you hear different beeps and then you see different flashes. And this is that multimodal integration that I was talking about earlier, that, often the older adults at risk of falls are slower at integrating this dual information. And what was really fascinating was that also significantly improved at the 4 week mark. And then again, also was even better at the 12-week mark. Same with that perception in the ankles, which was really cool. But what was really fascinating to me was this step, this choice stepping reaction task. It's something that's been looked at in many different studies, and this is this ability to take a fast compensatory step. So these people stand on a platform, and there's two panels in front of them and two panels beside them, beside their feet, and one of those four panels will light up. And the idea is that the patient has to choose, okay, is it on the right side or the left side? If it's on the right side, they move their right foot. If it's on the left side, they move their left foot. And they either then have to step forward or to the side as fast as they can. Now, at 4 weeks of chiropractic care, there was no difference between the groups. And I'll come back to that because I think this is really, really interesting. At 4 weeks, when the improvement was there in the ankle perception, knowing what was going on in the ankle, and the sound induced flash illusion improvements were there at 4 weeks, but no difference in this choice stepping task. But at 12 weeks, there was this massive difference.
Wow.
Bigger improvement than what's been seen in this big 6-month trial for older adults with exercise. So 3 months of chiropractic care outperformed the improvement in this particular task. Just go back to that sound-induced flash illusion. There's nothing that has ever really shown changes like the chiropractic intervention has for that, because you're literally changing the interpretation of sound and visual information and speeding up the ability to do that accurately. Like again, we're having that direct impact into the brain's ability to accurately perceive what's going on in and around you. And what I thought was really fascinating is that it took between 4 to 12 months before this stepping task. So I've been thinking a lot about that. And I think it's because it's a much more complex task that we're asking them to do, because it's requiring both the perception of a light, a choice of which leg
Direction.
to move, and then the actual movement of the leg without falling as fast as they can. So it shows you like multiple things here. It's showing that with chiropractic care, even in older adults, where you think, no, your brain's all worn out. No, no, no. It can still change and improve and for the better. And not only that, but these perceptual changes happen quite quickly, whereas more complicated tasks take a bit more time. So if you've gone to a chiropractor once or twice and then decided it doesn't work for you, well, newsflash, because this comes right down to the mechanisms again. What we're really seem to be doing when the chiropractor is adjusting your spine is exercising those little muscles around the spine back into proper function, because we're activating them. We're sending that communication to the brain. The brain's resetting its programs, and that you can't exercise once or twice and then be fit for life, right? I wish it worked that way, but it doesn't quite work that way, does it, Sherry?
I could eat once, I'll be full forever, right? That's the way
I
it has
know,
to
I
be,
know,
but it's never
I
that
know.
way.
No,
You know,
and,
it's
and then we followed this up with multiple, well, not we, there's other people that have looked at things like healthy aging and with or without chiropractic. And it appears that the people that get chiropractic care, they don't lose their daily functional activities. They don't lose their independence. Whereas if you don't get any chiropractic care, there seems to be this slow, steady decline. So to me, it's like well, I know whether I want to maintain my functions or not. And like, we haven't looked at things like how often they get adjusted or for how long they get adjusted. They might just be going once a month, like, so there's so many factors that we haven't tested out yet. But to me, I go twice a week. I don't know about you, but I literally get adjusted, and I've been doing that for years now.
absolutely, like, look how
Maybe
fired you're
because of
you're
the
up right
research.
now. Is when I think about the relationship, I want people to really recognize what Dr. Horvick just said is neuroscience with the involvement of a chiropractic adjustment input, so that motor output becomes equal to sensory input. I want it
Yeah.
for the mathematicians out there. I know they're out there and they're somewhere. That really means the quality of movement depends heavily on the quality of information entering the nervous system. If you get chiropractic adjustment, which I don't know, Dr. Horvick, where else do you get a healthcare provider coming in and changing your motor output by bringing in additional sensory input that really fine tunes a system that should be
Mm.
able to continually balance, or shall we say, align everything you do in life. That's really the spine and the brain and how they're connecting. We're really talking about position and motion. You talked about stability. You talked about balance. All of these pieces are where chiropractic has been fitting for 132 years. Now we're getting to see the beauty of how it all comes together in balance. So tell me more
And what's even
about.
more, yeah, what's even more cutting edge, like in the recent years, Sherry, we've done a bit of a recap there, but a lot of what we've looked at over the years is this sensory motor interaction and exactly what you're talking about, that allowing the brain more information about what's going on in the core of the body, it enables the brain to move more accurately, be more accurately aware of where the body is and all of that. But what's really blowing my mind away in the last couple of years are these changes in things like, the way the body responds to stress, the way it switches on our antioxidant system, like the way it can enable us to grow and change our brain even more. And this is where and things like mental health changes. Like in one of our recent clinical trials that we did in the UK, these patients had some back problems, but when we looked at the questionnaires that we asked the patients of the study after the 4 weeks of chiropractic care, there were clinically meaningful, significant improvements in aspects of their mental health, like anxiety and depression and fatigue. And that's a
Yes.
big thing these days. Like a lot of us are really stressed out, and a lot of worry turns into anxiety, and a lot of sadness can turn into depression. And we know that, again, they're on spectrums. And the fact that adjusting the spine could have significant clinically meaningful improvements in anxiety, depression, and fatigue, that to me is telling us again that we're impacting networks that are involved in how the brain interprets our emotions and our emotional reality. And to me, these things are, this is really, really exciting cutting edge research. Like another thing we did in another study, and I know you want to dive in there. I can sense the anxiety, depression thing, because it's a huge, like it's never really been shown before. But another thing that we've recently found in a big clinical trial too, we did a whole lot of neuroimmune markers. And I believe it's the first ever prospective randomized controlled trial looking at neuroimmune markers over 12 weeks of chiropractic care. And one of the really fascinating outcomes was that if you don't get chiropractic care, and these people weren't necessarily in like chronic pain or anything like that. They were what we call a subclinical pain category, which means they get recurring ache pains of tension in the spine, but they weren't in pain when the study started. So this isn't a pain study. This is very purely a chiropractic study. And if they didn't get chiropractic care, at the end of the study, it was at 16 weeks, so it was 12 weeks of care or sham. And funnily enough, Sherry, 94% of the participants genuinely thought they were getting the
Wow.
real chiropractic care. That's how well the chiropractor did the control intervention, the sham, the pretend chiropractic care, which I always think is really, really quite amazing that they can manage that. But over the 16 weeks, the inflammatory markers were worse in the group that didn't get the chiropractic care. It's not that the chiropractic group had less inflammation, although there was a little bit less cortisol towards the end there. But it's so that was one thing to me that stood out, because we also recorded every single indicator that the spine wasn't well. So as a chiropractor, we look for things like the way the vertebra, that the bones in the spine are moving, the joint play, which means that you just press on the joint. So if you just move one bone compared to the other, it should have a little bit of a springiness to it, right? And that goes away when there's the dysfunction there, where these little muscles around the area have become stiff and fibrotic. And often it's tender to the touch because, again, of those micro traumas. So we get these little swellings around the area and it's inflamed. And so when you press on them, even though they don't necessarily hurt, when you press on them, then they're tender. They're like, oh, ow, that's not very nice. And so all these little clinical indicators of the presence of that dysfunction in the spine. We measured that too. I mean, I don't know, bless this chiropractor. He was amazing. And interestingly, I mean, duh, over the 16 weeks in one group, and I'll let you guess which one, there was like no change in those clinical indicators of dysfunction in the spine. Whereas in the other group, it started high and then it just disappeared. So that the improvement in the clinical indicators of spinal dysfunction just reduced. So obviously, we're improving the function of the spine that we can palpate, that we can actually feel as chiropractors. On top of that, if you don't get chiropractic care, not only do you not get rid of these indicators of spinal dysfunction, but you also know that your inflammatory markers get worse and worse. But then you look at what happened in the chiropractic group. Well, there was this increase in this. The main thing we were looking at is this biomarker of brain plasticity, adaptability, and brain health called the brain-derived neurotrophic factor. If you Google search brain-derived neurotrophic factor, you will see that it's been described as fertilizer for the brain.
Love it.
Literally brain fertilizer. That was significantly increased at the end of the study, at the 12 weeks of chiropractic care, compared to the sham group that didn't get any chiropractic care. And then we looked even deeper. So, I mean, but that in itself, like we know that, say, for example, if you exercise, brain-derived neurotrophic factor increases. And the higher that is, the more adaptable and flexible and able to change your brain is. And these are markers of health and resilience and, well-being. Like, again, it's nice and high in athletes and it's really, really low in couch potatoes and, people that don't necessarily put too much effort into their health. We also looked deeper into this and we found this other marker called interleukin 6, which is a really fascinating little cytokine. It can be either pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory, meaning it can sort of be kind of a good thing or a bad thing. Now, if it's a pro-inflammatory marker, we don't really want to have, it's okay with inflammation a little bit if you're healing something, right? So it's kind of like a good inflammation, but we overall want it to be decreased, which again is what, was happening in the chiropractic group. But what we also know, if that interleukin 6 is pro-inflammatory, it will make the liver produce this other cytokine called C-reactive protein. Now, our C-reactive protein did not increase. So we're thinking, so most likely then that interleukin 6 increase that we saw is not a pro-inflammatory marker in this particular case, or the C-reactive protein would have been increased too, but it wasn't. So it didn't increase. So then I looked more into what that interleukin 6 is. And another thing another big role of interleukin 6 is not as a cytokine, but as a myokine, as a marker of muscle regeneration. So I reckon, again, well, that makes perfect sense because what, again, we're doing with the chiropractic care is we are regenerating those muscles around the spine that have been dysfunctional for however long there's been a problem in the spine. So it makes perfect sense that it's acting as a myokine in this case. So again, some really fascinating research that's pretty much hot off the press.
This is very hot, and I'm going to go even hotter, which is I had this amazing ability to hear the things that you've done and really be able to promote them in different ways. And one of them happened to be hearing the um, writing a chapter called Adjusted Intelligence. We're going to get a little bit into the AI space for a moment. So I wrote a chapter called Adjusted Intelligence, really playing off the adjusted reality framework and how extraordinarily influential you've been in this brain economy space. So the World Economic Forum, we got to actually introduce the chapter of adjusted intelligence. In our past, I'm just going to take Heidi on a little journey here. Um, the World Economic Forum was really showcasing the brain economy, which in the past was really more about talking about physical labor, manufacturing, stuff that most people will go, okay, if we don't have this, we won't have that. And it's building
Mhm.
your economy. How much does your country see the future in the development of what's going to happen? Heidi's breaking research right now that is changing the way the world looks at things, such as the new brain economy that's emerging, which is, can you have focus, emotional
Mhm.
intelligence, human performance,
Mhm.
cognitive endurance? And then
Mhm.
what are some of the really important things that we need to do as human beings for the next currency level? And that's going to actually go from not just attention, like brain economy of how smart we are, but our focus, our engagement. And then I want to ask you about, as we know from the infrastructure you just talked about, it's going to help us with our emotional stability, our movement. You just talked about that with the small muscles, but there's other pieces that are involved. And I want to get your thoughts on this because, as we know, a poor brain health leads to a poor brain economy, burnout, anxiety, depression, chronic pain, cognitive function, all the things we just talked about. But a really highly functioning industrial economy will have mental resilience. They'll
Mhm.
have great learning capacity. And one thing that I think is very, very important on the edge of your seat right now, you should be, how do you build a World Economic Forum that showcases brain economy, human connection? Do not
Yes.
underestimate the power of human connection and how AI, if we use it for humanity in the right way, we're going to be building better, stronger, and we'll have greater ability to move forward. So I want you to comment, Dr. Horvick, on the nervous system and human performance as you see it, kind of as I laid out the brain economy. Where do you see the ability for our cognition, our energy, our focus, perhaps even our executive performance go up?
Mhm. It's you're spot on. It's literally what we are, like the absolute latest clinical trials that we have just completed basically, and we are analyzing right now, is looking at all of these things. So we're looking at executive functions because we've known for about 10 years now that when we're adjusting the spine, we particularly impact this part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, which is right behind our forehead. And that prefrontal cortex and the cerebellum, which is at the back of the brain, both of those two parts of the brain are really very, very important in how we experience our own reality. There's multiple things you've mentioned there that I wanted to touch on, and so remind me if I forget. But because one of the absolute latest studies that we've just started right now is looking at that brain to brain connection. So, like there's something that takes place in a clinical interaction, like it's not just that we're adjusting bones in the back and, ignoring the human being in front of us. And so, what's been a really exciting area of neuroscience, in my opinion, is that we're starting to look at what's called hyperscanning, where you're actually recording the brain waves from two people at the same time and how their brain waves can actually synchronize
Whoa.
under certain conditions. For example, like if you've got a new mother and her baby, and you measure EEG from the baby and the mama, if mama plays with baby, baby's brain synchronizes with mum's brain. We know, for example, in jazz musicians, their brains synchronize as they're playing together. We know, so there's multiple examples of this, and I think an important part of the clinical interaction between a chiropractor and their patient. I mean, I've met thousands of chiropractors, and they tend to be so similar. They're caring individuals. They seem to care more about the health of their patients than their patients do themselves, if you know what
Yes,
I mean.
a hundred
And I
percent.
mean that.
I
It's almost
totally agree
ridiculous.
with you. I totally,
Yeah.
because they don't, it goes back to the saying, Heidi, that I had with my husband at lunchtime. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And chiropractors truly, from the bottom of their hearts to the muscle that they touch in the spine that they call to, they care, truly care
They
about
care.
that person in front of them.
And I want to measure that. because I reckon that when the patient, because one of the things that I was taught even, and I think a lot of chiropractors are taught about, you know, that when you're with a patient, you're not to think about anything else in your world, in your life. Your focus, your full attention is on that patient in front of you, not the spine, the human being. And I
Exactly.
reckon that that might be where the glitter dust is, where the actual magic happens, because it gets like the X factor, right, of chiropractic care. I reckon you'll find that ability to be present and in tune with your patient, and like, I think that's, and I think we can be able to find that or measure that in the EEG studies, the hyperscanning studies that we've just started, where we're looking at that synchronization between the patient's brain and the doctor's brain. And it's one of the things I'm really, really excited about, because we also know that there's this whole system in our brains called the mirror neuron system, where we actually pick up on the signals that you give out, and it sort of evokes in us the same sort of sensations, and that enables us to feel empathy and connect with human beings. Funnily enough, that also happens in the prefrontal cortex. So our ability to interact with other human beings, to sense what's going on for them, to feel empathy for them, that again, that human to human connection, very, very important in that prefrontal cortex, that again, we know we're impacting when we're adjusting people. So we're really digging into exactly what you're talking about now, that cognitive flexibility. The increase in BDNF would indicate that there is an increase in cognitive flexibility, because it's literally fertilizer for the brain, enabling it to function better. I mean, that's literally what BDNF tends to be. There's some other really interesting research that, again, I haven't published yet, but it's just hot, hot, hot off the press
Oh,
again.
we're getting the fine
Yeah.
factors here now.
One of these is this transcriptomics. And you might wonder, what the hell is a transcriptomics? But it's literally how our genes get turned on and off, like Bruce Lipton's epigenetic story, right? That it's, our genes are just blueprints that can be read, right? And depending on what you're doing in your life, you can have your bad genes turned on, or you can have your good genes turned on. And there's so many of these genes, but we're not doomed by our genetic makeup. It depends on what you're doing in your life, right? So we again have looked at what genes get turned on and off, period of chiropractic care versus sham care. And I mean, honestly, Sherry, like, it's mind-boggling. So this is led by this awesome, awesome researcher in my lab called Imran Amjad, PhD physiotherapist, a phenomenal scientist. And he's coming back with the results of this chiropractic study, showing that it's not just one gene, like there's a whole suite of genes that are responsible for things like our antioxidant effects. So you know how antioxidants are so good, you've got to eat this, that, and the other thing. Well, our body can also create antioxidants. And so this is boosted. Our oxygenation, our ability to, utilize oxygen is boosted in like the genes that are turned on. Stress resilience. So being able to literally cope with stress, it, again, is being boosted according to this study. And I'm asking, like, is it individual genes? And he goes, no, there's whole families of them. Like, that's what makes it
Wow.
so strong. Like, he's blown away. I'm blown away. He's using names that I don't even know what these names are. I mean, because genetic genes and the names of genes is not my expertise. I'll happily leave that with him. But all of these different studies, Sherry, are all pointing to the same thing, that by looking after the health of your spine, and so many people don't know this, you've got to look up, you've only got one spine. And if you change it, well, then you kind of ruin half the magic, because, if you like, even if you fuse it, because then you're losing those little vital muscles, right? So you've only got the one spine. Those little muscles that are close deep to the spine, they have a profound impact on how your brain perceives what's going on in your body and the world around you, on your ability to think, on your ability to feel, on your ability to connect with other human beings, on your ability to sense where you are in space and to move appropriately and to control posture and, mood. And we're looking at now all these different networks, like the networks that are involved in your idea of what's happening inside your body, or your they're called body schemas, or the world schemas, how your body interacts with the rest of the world. Like, if you've got clumsiness, or if you're pulling muscles, or if you're you know thinking very negative thoughts, I'm not suggesting just go see a chiropractor for that, but all of these different things can be impacted by getting your chiropractic care. I suppose what I'm trying to say is, to me, what the research is telling me is that getting your spine looked after, checked and adjusted, move every day, don't just sit still, make sure you move that spine, do simple spinal exercises, but getting it regularly checked and adjusted, it's like the foundation for which all the other pillars of health stand. Like, you can exercise your muscles, but you can be doing yourself damage unless the brain is sending the right messages to the right muscles at the right time, to the right degree, to contract in the right order. So, if your awareness of what's going on in the arms and legs and spine and back is not accurate, then you're going to be moving wrong. Then you're going to be causing these little micro traumas. But it seems to be bigger than that. It's the way you are responding to what's happening around you, and whether that's worsening a story that's sort of engraving depression and anxiety into your brain reality, versus not going, oh, this isn't actually that dangerous. I'm okay. And this is another thing we know now about pain too, Sherry, is that pain is actually not a tissue pathology warning system. It is a danger warning system. So it's your brain interpreting threat. But our brain's interpretation of what's happening is very colored by past experiences. So if you've had sort of any kind of traumatic experiences from your past, you might be experiencing something that's relatively innocuous and not harmful at all, but your brain can react as if it's a real threat. So a lot of our chronic problems, and like pain and anxiety and depression, they're kind of built out of this internal brain model that you're under threat and that there's danger. Whereas someone else that's not experienced the same threats from their past as you have, could be experiencing the same situation and it'd be like, yeah, nothing, no big deal. And this is where this interplay between how we think and feel, and how our autonomic nervous system responds, it impacts our brain's story, our brain's narrative. And that's what we touched on in the last episode, wasn't it? The default mode
It was,
network in the brain
yes.
that creates those stories that we know chiropractic care changes dramatically.
You're so spot on. And you said, for those that because there was a lot to unpack there, but one of the things that I think has a very significant, salient reality for everyone listening right now
Mm.
is that we go back to where Albert Einstein would say, and this is Heidi and I's favorite man. Too bad he doesn't walk the earth because he's such an amazing individual. Everything is energy, and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. This is physics. It can be no other way. Now, when you think about this, one of the smartest men that's ever walked the earth, Albert Einstein, is talking about energy. And then, Dr. Haavik, you talked about touch, human touch, the frequency. Everybody knows. You can think about someone right now. We can all shut our eyes and think about someone that you absolutely love and adore, and your body chemistry can change. Then you can think about someone that has really been a pain in your neck, and your body chemistry will change again. You get to choose, as Bruce Lipton, as you brought into this, and then starting to really dive deep into what does it really look like when we start talking about transcriptomics, which is a special word that just came out of my mouth for the first time, the genes that are turned on or off. I go back to Dr. Haavik. Some of the things that I want people to recognize is the future focus for a World Economic Forum really comes by energy. It's so simple. And it actually goes back to another statement. If you can't explain it simply enough, you don't know it well enough. That's another Albert Einstein quote. So you want to maintain your cognitive function. You want to be able to think as best you can. You want to prevent your nerves from continuing to decline in their ability to do their job. So what we're really talking about is enhancing the quality of life for you, optimizing what
Yes.
you are possible to do, because I believe the current 70 years old is the now 40-year-old, once we actually figure out the pieces that go into the principles that you're talking about, adaptability, the creative human cognition, when we're actually using the lifespan piece moving into the health span reality. What I'm talking about is
Mm.
no one wants to live sicker longer, period. No one does. Said no
No,
one ever.
no.
We want to live healthier longer with more vibration. That's the energy focus
Yeah.
that you're talking about, going back to the brain economy. And what I wanted you to go back on, because I thought it was really quite fascinating, and I'm hoping it's not something that people that are listening underplay, is when we actually understand and reshape that genes being on and off. We're talking about the precision of how we build our health and the brain science, because now we're not only building a better future, we're actually building better humans, by which a mother
Mm.
can then have a baby that is even better than the genetic piece. Chiropractic plays
Mm.
into that, and I wanted you to talk about one piece on this. And I know I could keep Dr. Horvick forever, but talk to me about when we see chiropractic as a lifestyle choice of building it
Yeah.
into your habits versus a pain style opportunity, because I think they're very different. Many people
All they are. Yeah.
that come to chiropractic come because they have pain, and that's like the bottom of the barrel on the reality of what chiropractic brings. Share with our audience, because you've had so much intense research, that's it's chiropractic plus 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 plus.
Yeah. And it's totally okay. Like people do come to chiropractors for many different reasons. The model I like the best to explain to people is that, you know, a good chunk of people come to chiropractors because they have pain or a problem, right? And so they want help with the pain or the problem. And that's cool. You know, we know chiropractic is very good at pain, back pain, neck pain, headaches, you know, it's great. So and natural, right? And then you have people that come for prevention. They've, you know, had problems and they don't want to go back to it. So they maintain a maintenance care to prevent there being problems that reoccur. And then there are that other chunk of people that go to chiropractors to improve their potential, to optimize their health and well-being and potential. I'm in that last bracket. And I don't judge anyone whether they're coming for pain or prevention or for boosting their potential. Doesn't matter. Because again, it's our own choice. One of the things that you mentioned there stirred something in me because what's really, really fascinating, and you ask any chiropractor, patients who come and seek chiropractic care and get regular care for a while, they start to make different choices. And this always fascinated me. There's multiple things that happen. They sleep better. They feel better. They function better. You know, they come back in, but then they start making better choices for themselves. And it always used to fascinate me because now it's starting to make a lot more sense, knowing that we're changing things like the prefrontal cortex, because that prefrontal cortex is our executive functions, but people might not understand what executive functions actually means. It's your ability to make plans, to make smart choices, to set goals and achieve those goals. And this is a snowball effect because as you start to make positive choices in your life, and then you're rewarded because you feel better and function better, and then you feel proud of yourself. And this is like dopamine released in the brain, and so your brain is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So it's again, it's where I just want to come back to that. To me, that chiropractic care, the looking after my spine, you know, I go if I'm home twice a week to my chiropractor, and I pay for it too, and I know I spend a fortune on it. But to me, it's that important for my health and my well-being because I need my brain to function at its best, to be able to be flexible. And you know, I'm doing cutting-edge neuroscience research. I certainly need my brain to be, you know, on all the time, you know, because I'm getting all these new results, and I'm like, well, what does that mean? Well, what does that mean? And so, you know, I'm the one that has to go and read all about it. So that foundational block, and on there, well, I'm making better choices for myself. I'm exercising more. I do yoga. I'm taking certain supplements to supplement my diet. I'm, you know, very conscious of the food I eat. I did I say exercise? I mean exercise, exercise, exercise. It's just so important. Like I've literally got dogs to make sure that I walk every day because I know how important it is. But it's not always easy. Like I also know how hard it is when you're really burnt out and you're really low. And I've been there. So I understand that sometimes you haven't got the capacity to do the right things, even though you know what you should be doing. You're not necessarily able to do it. But again, I just recommend just start getting adjusted, because as you start to get adjusted, it's actually switching on that part of your brain that enables you to see possibilities, to make choices, to set goals. And then, just having that loving care from another human being, the safe touch from checking the spine and adjusting the dysfunctional areas, it it's well, we know it's fertilizing the brain, don't we? It's releasing BDNF, which we now know is is increasing over time, which enables you to be more and more flexible. When you're right down and incapable of doing anything, you know, I think the one thing you need is that boost and fertilizer to your brain. Like it enables you to cope. And just feeling like you can cope is phenomenal, right? Once you've coped for a little while because you're being adjusted, then you can start to take the next step. And like I might, cut out the alcohol, or I might start walking around the block every day, or I might, and it's these little choices that then become big impacts on your health long term. And you're changing the way you think, and you're changing the way you feel, and you're changing your capacity for your brain to grow and adapt. It's I get goosebumps thinking about the potential for health that is in someone's spine and they don't know it. And that's what irks me the most, is most people have no idea
They
how
really don't.
important their spine is and
So
do nothing about it.
I do absolutely love that you and I could go on forever. This is something
Oh, I know, I know, I know.
that has gone in my head for a long time. And for everybody listening, Dr. Horvick and I do not talk as often as we'd like. And she was not prepped for this event of having an adjusted reality podcast. But I do love where you go with things, because you make me think bigger. And the choices that we make by a doctor who puts their touch, a mechanical sensation, a sensory, um, and one of the things, because we started talking about energy, and I started thinking about, what's really interesting is you start thinking about how the sound frequencies happen around us. And they
Mhm.
get measured, and sometimes they even get tagged as something that can help people. Like 528 hertz is a sound frequency. It's often referred for many of us as the love frequency. 528. So when you talk about love, you can resonate at a certain frequency. And this is across culture, but then you started to talk about how the brain frequency changes. So 528 often makes
Yeah.
people feel, I have less stress, I am supported in my well-being. And I'm starting to think, well, maybe that's why people make better choices, because you said they make better choices. Maybe it's because they're sleeping better. Maybe it's because they're calm and someone's touched them and their DNA is repairing. And we just had, the caring, empathy, the mood. Maybe that's the stress response is going down. But then you started making me think, but what about the brain waves? Right? Because that's the sound wave,
Mm.
528,
Mm.
but the brain waves, that also is synergistic to relaxation and the meditation space. And, we know
We
from
need a whole
fact,
nother episode, Sherry.
I was just thinking that, Heidi. I'm so
We need a
sorry.
whole nother episode,
Okay, this
because
is where we're going to go with
literally
this.
that's
We're
where
going to
we're at
hold that.
now.
We do. We
Yeah,
have to
we are
hold that
measuring these brain waves now, before, during, and
during
after
and
chiropractic
after.
care.
Okay, we promise to come
Yeah,
back on these. So we just tempted
yeah,
the audience
do that.
so we're going to come back with a podcast with
Yeah,
Heidi Horvick on 528 hertz plus brain waves plus the
yeah.
economy of being better, living better, knowing better, having better. Because when you start to know things that you didn't know before, your reality adjusts. And that is why you listen to Adjusted Reality. So I'm going to cut her off right there, because I think her and I have just had an epiphany because our brains started to synchronize. So, Dr. Horvick, I want you to promise that you're going to come back. We're going to talk about love
I promise.
on a whole
Yes.
brain wave, on a whole sound frequency wave, so that we can talk about how the body is respondent to the input that comes in. There was a fellow I met at the World Economic Forum who was involved in brain mapping. He's the world's expert in brain mapping. And when I talked to him just for 5 minutes, I swear I got smarter. And then I wanted to work harder. And then I wanted to do better. So Heidi has done the exact same thing as this expert on brain mapping to me. And that means my audience is going to come back. So, Dr. Haavik, I'm going to give you the floor for 5 minutes to wrap this up because I know my audience loves you. I know they get something out of it. So, I want you to give them homework before they leave, but I want you to kind of wrap up what they should know from this episode and then give them homework.
Thanks for that, Sherry. I mean, I just love talking to you. I hope we haven't gone too far out there today because I know we've talked about some quite complex topics like switching on and off genes and brain networks and transcriptomics and but anyway, okay. So bringing it all together, I think the key message that I want to get out there is from all this work I've been doing now for, I know I've 18 years since my PhD, but I even started this, before my PhD and throughout my PhD. Um, what's becoming very, very clear to me is that the way your spine functions influences the way your brain functions. And your brain is basically what's running the show. It's your brain that creates your reality, how you feel about yourself, how you feel about others, how you function, how you control your organs, how you control your autonomic nervous system. And we know that this can shift and we know that this can change. And so I'd really like to encourage people to look after their spines. I do not think people are good enough at looking after their spines. I mean, we look after our teeth, we spend a fortune on, and that's cosmetic, right? What we're talking about with health here, what we're talking about with the spine is literally health and function. And we need to invest in our own spine. I think that's homework number one, is how can you invest in your spine? And if you can't afford chiropractic care, go and talk to a chiropractor because many chiropractors would still take care of you. And again, you don't know how that changes your brain and opportunities. And all of a sudden you've got a, change in your job. And, that's probably getting a little esoteric for people, but nothing surprises me anymore when I see people getting under chiropractic care. Nothing that always surprises me with people getting under chiropractic care is they seem to change their past. And this is really quite mind-boggling. Like, I don't know how many chiropractors will agree with you or agree with me on this, that people that get under chiropractic care, they almost forget how bad they were. But it's not that they've forgotten, it's that their reality has shifted and changed. And even though it's in their writing, they're like, oh no, I wasn't that bad. Because they are now functioning at a different level. And, and this has probably upset many chiropractors over the years because they're like, well, hang on a minute, I've just helped you with this massive problem and you don't even remember it. But to me, it's the beauty because our pasts can change and our expectations for the future can change. And we know that those two things alone can change your reality. So this importance of your spinal function for your current reality, for your future possibilities it's massive. So I'd encourage you to look after your spine. Look up spinal exercises, yoga exercise, movement, always move every day. If you can, find yourself a good chiropractor that you gel with. It's what Sherry was talking about, that energy. If it's right, it's right. Go see someone that lifts you up energetically as well as your adjustments in your spine, and you just feel better and you function better and you make better choices. And it might seem insignificant, but it's not, because your reality is built up from all these tiny, tiny little moments and choices and thoughts and feelings that we are making every day. And if you can shift that in a positive direction, it will change your life.
Wow. There's the showstopper right there. We're changing lives today with Dr. Heidi Haavik. She is not only a passionate, invigorated, highly purposeful chiropractor, she's someone who is putting her money, her time, her talents into defining humanity in a better way. And I think that is why you, as my audience, continue to ask for her back. And yes, I promise I will get her back because, she travels a lot. And to get her back takes me about 6 to 8 months. So I promise to get her back. But first and foremost, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on Adjusted Reality today. I know my audience loves you, so it is such a pleasure to have you. And thank you for being with us today.
Thanks, Sherry. I love talking to you anytime. Let's talk frequencies.
Well, I want to thank you for tuning in to Adjusted Reality as we spoke to Dr. Heidi Haavik about the science and the research about chiropractic and how it relates to everything we do, from the brain to where we put our foot, and so much more. And while she gave you homework, you heard it. You know exactly what that homework is. I'm hoping you take a moment to reflect on how important your life is and where you want it to go. Your health span depends on it, and the people around you that love you, they want you to be your very best. Now, as you always know, this podcast was brought to you by the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress. We know life moves pretty fast, and we want you to make sure you never miss an episode. So visit f4cp.org/adjusted reality to subscribe to our newsletter. Now, while you're there, make sure you pick up a copy of Adjusted Reality book. That could be changing people's lives, just as this podcast that I hope you share with your friends and family. Now, let's say you're interested in hearing from a very specific guest, like you do when you tagged me and said, please bring back Dr. Heidi Haavik. Well, you can also send your guest recommendations there as well. Can't get enough Adjusted Reality? Well, I'm excited to share that if you get your book, you can actually get the hard copy and then send perhaps the electronic copy to a friend. Maybe it's an audiobook. You want to go to the gym and listen to it on audiobook. It's available for you in that form too. Now, don't forget to subscribe. As always, share the podcast with friends and family, rate and review. We haven't had a lot of rates and reviews, so please do that now. And if you're feeling so inspired to learn more about chiropractic or to find a doctor of chiropractic near you, you can visit f4cp.org/find a doctor. We appreciate your support, and as always, look forward to checking in with you again soon.